Okay, guys, so I wanted to go over the Usborne that I did not do with you guys. So I'm going to kind of go over that with you guys real quick right now. So the first page is 366 and 367. So I'm going to be reading off of these pages, okay? So this says good times, bad times, and it talks about during the 1920s that the United States of America was the richest country in the world. Businesses boomed and factories produced lots of new goods such as washing machines, vacuum cleaners, and cars. Not everyone was rich, but most Americans thought life was getting better. The 1920s are often known as the Jazz Age because of the new music and dances that were popular at the time. Some daring young women known as flappers cut their hair short and wore their skirts above their knee. And so here's a couple performing the Charleston during that 1920s Jazz Age. And then from 1920 to 1933, it was illegal to make or sell alcohol in the USA. This period of time is known as, the Prohibition. Many people drank secretly in illegal bars called speakeasies, and gangsters such as Al Capone grew rich by making smuggling and selling alcohol. Then in 1929, and this is what we just discussed, was the Wall Street crash. So the good times came to an end in 1929 when thousands of people were ruined in a financial disaster known as the Wall Street crash. During the 1920s, many Americans had bought shares in businesses hoping to make money by selling them later at a higher price. But in October 1929, share prices began to fall. People panicked and started selling their shares, and this made prices drop even lower until the shares were almost worthless. This disaster is known as the Wall Street crash because Wall Street is the home of the New York Stock Exchange where shares were bought and sold. So then we had the Great Depression, and after the Wall Street crash, banks and businesses failed, and millions of people lost their jobs. Thousands of families lost their homes as well because they couldn't afford to pay the rent. This period of terrible poverty is known as the Great Depression, and it lasted most of the 1930s and affected countries all over the world. And we heard that on the video, how because of what it was happening in America, it actually started spreading because people weren't coming as tourists and weren't buying their goods and that sort of thing. So the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression also affected farmers. In the USA, the situation was made worse by the weather. In some central areas, fierce winds blew away the dusty soil, making it impossible to grow crops. These areas became known as the Dust Bowl. Many farming families left their homes to look for work in California on the West Coast, and that's where we heard about the Okies, remember? In 1932, Franklin D. Roosevelt became president of the United States, and he started up a series of projects known as the New Deal to help industry and farming and create new jobs. This did not end the Depression, but it made life easier for many Americans. And so we have a few important dates here I wanted you to look at. Take a look at that screen right there. And there's a picture of someone during the Great Depression. So we've got 1920 to 1933 was Prohibition. So it lasted for 13 years. 1929 is when Wall Street crashed. 1932, Roosevelt became president. And 1933, he launched the New Deal. And so I wanted you guys to hear that. And then 368 and 369. So then we had the other thing that we were talking about was the rise of fascism. And we talked a lot about that. I'm just going to read you some of that right now. After the First World War, many countries in Europe faced huge problems. Governments had very little money because they had spent so much on weapons for the war. Lots of people were out of work and there wasn't enough food for everyone. So people began to think that these problems needed new drastic solutions. So the first fascist came along. In Italy, the problems were particularly bad. Many people turned to Benito Mussolini, the leader of the fascist party. Mussolini became the prime minister of Italy in 1922. And soon he banned all other political parties and took complete control of the country. This way of ruling is known as fascism. And we've got a picture here of Mussolini on the top, and then of course of Hitler here on the bottom. After World War I, the winning countries decided that Germany should pay for the damage caused by the war. The Germans were forced to reduce the size of their army and navy and were not allowed to have an air force. Germany also had to give up large areas of land, and many Germans felt angry and humiliated by all of this, and they blamed their government for agreeing to it. In 1929, of course, we had the Depression, and Germany was hit by the Great Depression, which we just talked about. Millions of Germans lost their jobs, but the government did nothing to help. People became desperate, and some turned to the National Socialist Workers' Party, or the Nazi Party, led by Adolf Hitler. And then Hitler persuaded people that their problems were caused by foreigners, especially Jews. He believed that the Germans were superior to other races and said he would make Germany powerful again. He promised strong leadership, jobs for everyone, and an end to poverty. The Nazis held huge meetings or rallies all over Germany to persuade people to vote for them. By 1932, they were the biggest party in the German parliament. It's called the Reichstag. And in 1933, Hitler became chancellor, which is head of the government. He then persuaded the Reichstag to give him complete control of his country. And of course, this is the swastika, or the symbol of the Nazi party right there. Once Hitler was in power, he banned all political parties except the Nazi Party. He took control of the newspapers and the radio, and he forced schools and universities to teach Nazi ideas. Children had to join Nazi youth groups, and anyone who disagreed with the Nazis was arrested by the secret police, which was called the Gestapo. The Nazis made life impossible for Jews. They weren't allowed to marry Germans, own land, do certain jobs, or even go out at night. Gangs of Nazi thugs attacked Jewish people, vandalized Jewish shops, and burned synagogues. So some important dates there. In 1919, Mussolini set up the Fascist Party in Italy. He came to power in 1922. In 1929, the Great Depression began. In 1933, Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany. In 1934, he took control as Führer, or leader of Germany. And in 1938, Nazis attacked thousands of Jewish homes, shops, and synagogues. And that was sort of the start of all of that. And second part of 26, I don't know what that, so it's 368, 69 with second part. Oh, okay, reading the second part of 26. Those are the Usborne that we missed this week and I didn't get to.